Hello and welcome back to State of the Division. This time with a card I was incredibly excited for and sad I couldn't watch with my friend in person. And then a lot of stuff happened and it all went very much pear-shaped. That being said, there are still some interesting fights. The replacement fight is fun, if not exactly something I'm super interested in. And honestly, this card should still be pretty good, even if it does lack a bit of the prestige of the original card that we are being, I want to say denied, but rather being screwed out of by random chance and luck. That being said, we got to get into the basics and we got to address the Butcher's Bill and the housekeeping. Now for the Butcher's Bill. We only have 3 fighters as of recording this, which means within about 48 hours, a lot could go wrong. Matt Schnell is out of his fight. He is replaced. I do believe there's a bit more notice than that. John Jones and Stipe Miocic are both out of this fight card. John Jones apparently tore his pec in sparring. I don't believe it was a straight-up muscle tear. I believe he tore it off the bone, which is equally painful and requires surgery, but I believe its recovery time can be a little shorter than the other one. And the other fighter removed as of 5-ish days ago is Nurullo Aliyev, which I learned last minute as I was finishing the script up. All 3 fighters are out, including Stipe being out. He was not even offered another fight. They instead did pivot to Aspinall Pavlovich, which overall is interesting. I do believe that does switch the main event around, making it now Jiri Prochazka, which I said wrong, and Alex Pereira, though that will be the main event now, with the co-main being Aspinall Pavlovich. Now for housekeeping. I am now 81-57 on the year, and at this point I feel very confident saying I will end the year over 500. I did not count any no contests from the last card, instead going about 8-5 overall. 8-5-2 if you want to be brutally honest. But that being said, I think I've covered the opening of the card, the pretty brutal Butcher's Bill. I say we jump right in. Starting this off, 11-3. Dennis, the Great Buzjuka, I'm so sorry, looks for the rebounding. It's 19-7. Jamal, pretty boy, Emmers. Buzjuka is 8 years younger, either 1 inch in favor or against, because Sherdog has him at 5'11 and UFC has him at 5'9, while Emmers is definitely 5'10. And 4 in reach going Emmers' way. Now, Buzjuka has a pretty small sample size, but as a whole, he's a grinder with 6 career decision wins, and in his 1 UFC win, contender series, but still, he did just enough to get the decision nod with 2 minutes of ground control and a minor striking lead. On that note, he doesn't seem to really jump out in any category when he fights. In his fight against Sean Woodson, he didn't land 1 takedown, had 2 minutes of control to Woodson's 8, and was outstruck by 30. I feel like he's decent at a chunk, but doesn't really do enough with any single category to win. Emmers is remarkably similar in terms of style and also a larger sample size. So in the numbers, he rocks a 4.98 to 3.79 in striking, which does highlight the effective nature of it, if not outstanding. It is backed up with a 1.98 takedown average, which does consistently show up and generate control time for him. As I said, he's a grinder, so there's not much else to add on, so we're going to jump right into what Vegas likes, and Vegas likes Emmers. And I'm going to agree. I don't got a lot here. Buzjuka does not have a large sample size, and Emmers does, and we've seen Emmers have success doing this grinding style that Buzjuka seems to want to do, in which he couldn't be successful in his fight with Sean Woodson. So I imagine the more successful Emmers, with the more experience and octagon time, UFC octagon time, will take the fight. 8-1, Joshua the Fearless Van looks for 2 in a row against 9-1, Kevin El Gallo Negro Borjas. Van is 4 years younger, with even height, but 3 inches in reach, rolling to Borjas. Now, both these guys only got 1 UFC fight, so you're going to have to bear with me here. Van looks to be a finisher, though, through and through, though, with 5 KO and 2 submission wins, where he consistently is pushing for the finish, or at least getting pressure as a result. He does seem to have a pretty solid strike variety, but the majority of the finishes do come by punches. In his 1 UFC fight, he outstruck his opponent 120 to 103 with an 8.0 to 6.87 in striking, so the output is there in spades. Borjas is very much in the same boat with 8 KO and 1 decision win, and in his UFC fight, he outstruck his opponent 87 to 43 with a 5.80 to 2.87. You don't see as much output, but he still had that same effective striking lead and did enough to take it there. Though that difference in strikeout, as being mentioned, could also have to do with the fact his opponent did have 5 takedowns, which tends to slow things down and limit the offense. When it does come to his striking, I don't feel his variety is the greatest. I think it is lesser than Van's, but he might have some decent clinch work given a few knee KOs mixed in there along with his record. Favorite is Van, and I'm hard-pressed to go against it. Again, I don't got a lot here. And I like Van's aggressiveness. I like his output. I like pushing it hard. I like that high-octane style here. While I think Borjas can match and Borjas might get the finish, I lean Vegas's way here because I can't get a great look, but also Borjas getting taken down 5 times mean he got control. He was able to get up, but he doesn't strike me as that high octane, high push it fighter. He's slower, relying on power. I say slower in air quotes. Slower, but relying in power and very much using that versus Vans. I'm going to output 100%. 20-6, John Sexy Mexi Castaneda looks to go 2 in a row against 19-9, 0-1, Mr. Perfect Hyung Ho Kang. Castaneda is 5 years younger, either 2 or 3 inches shorter, while also surrendering a definite 2 in reach. Castaneda is a weird fighter to try and make sense of. I think the closest phrase I use consistently is grinder, but even then he has 8 KO and 6 submission wins, which throws it all out of whack. In the numbers, he runs with a 4.24 to 4.80 in striking, which isn't great, but it is at least functional. However, he's great at getting knockdowns. He had 1 knockdown in each of his last 4 fights and won 3 of them. So, despite not running away with the striking, he's able to work his power and sit on it as a threat. He also has a really solid ground game that lets him capitalize off those knockdowns and even then control the fight with takedowns, a 1.69 average with 3 in each of his last 2. He does also have a submission ability, but he does only have 1 of those in the UFC. On the other hand, Kang is definitely a traditional grinder. He rocks a 309 to 291 in striking and never really takes the striking lead or draws on a huge amount of power. He does have some knockdowns, but it has not been consistent as Castaneda as of late. On the ground game side of things, he does rock a 2.07 takedown average and 12 career submission wins. Now in the UFC, he hasn't had a huge amount of submissions to sex, but he has been able to control his opponents on the ground and do enough with the striking to get the judges to give him the nod. Vegas likes Castaneda, and I will disagree. This is a bit of a reach, and I think it's a bit of a gut feeling, but Kang sits in a similar regard and similar style. And while I don't feel his striking is as good as Castaneda, and Castaneda's power might be better, we see him go into these fights and go the distance consistently. I think his takedown average being better does give him the advantage. I think it's something he can work off of. I think Castaneda is dangerous. I think Castaneda can use takedowns, but I think Kang's takedown game is a bit better in that regard and will set him up more to control the fight on the ground and maybe survive on the feet in comparison to the more even striking that Castaneda has relying on power. Ending off these prelims, I think and hope the order's all a bit screwy for this card. 19-6, 0-1, Jared Flash Gordon looks to notch a win against 12-1 Mark the Olympian Madsen. Gordon is 4 years younger at 35, either 1 inch taller or shorter, because Sherdog and UFC can't get their shit together, but a definite 4 in reach going to Madsen. Gordon is a bit of an odd duck, but seems like a grinder. That's a common phrase this card. In striking, he runs with a 5.32 to 3.28, and while he has 6 career KO wins, there has not been the one in the UFC since 2018. I will say that in his wins, he always seems to hold a significant lead and struggles in those closer fights when he can't pull away as much. His takedowns are also a major part of his game, where he stacks takedowns to rack the control time up. Doesn't seem like he pushes for the submission that much and is content to control and just get the points. Madsen is also a grinder, but does seem to be a bit more active in terms of pace and quantity. Striking is not great, which isn't surprising with this type of fighter, a 3.24 to 3.67, and he doesn't have any real KO power outside his first UFC fight. Now, his real strength is definitely his takedowns, with a 3.09 average and its consistent presence in all of his fights. He's able to rack up those takedowns, as well as one fight with 8 takedowns and one with 3. It is worth noting that he seems to struggle hard when he doesn't get the takedown. I don't know how many different ways he can go for the takedown. Vegas likes Gordon, and I'm again going to disagree. Do I think Gordon can win this fight? Definitely. But I like the aggressiveness of Madsen's takedowns a bit more. I like his high output in that regard. And I like the fact that I think the aggressiveness and will help him control the octagon and give him the control time he needs if he gets a takedown. Plus, I think he'll be able to survive the type of takedowns that we're going to see from Gordon. In the end, this one feels a bit of a reach, but I think I am going to run with Madsen here. 9-1, Nazim Black Wolf Sadiakov. I'm so sorry. Looks to keep the streak going. Vyacheslav Slavaklaus Borshev. Sadiakov is 2 years younger, 1 inch shorter, with reach being dead even. Sadiakov is a finisher, and he definitely likes to hang on the feet with 6 career KO finishes, 2 of those in the UFC, followed up by 2 submission wins. Now, he doesn't have a large UFC sample size, but from what there is, he has a 4.35 to 3.72, and while he hasn't lost in the UFC, he does tend to take damage in his fights. That is equalized a bit by his power coming in and lurking always in the wings. Takedowns are not a major part of his game plan, but he is able to reverse position and take advantage of mistakes to survive. Borshev Borshev also comes in as a finisher and is also heavy on the feet with 6 career KO wins and 3 of those in the UFC. Numbers wise, it's a 4.53 to 3.44 in striking, which does speak to his power that he can pour on. He doesn't tend to pull away in most of his fights, which does mean he can be decisioned in the end, though he doesn't get finished so far. The other thing to note is that he does only have a 35% takedown defense, which may be a bit of an issue in this fight. Borshev is the favorite, and I'm hard-pressed to go against. It should be close, but Sadykhov has the smaller sample size, and I think Borshev's experience, at least in the UFC, and the more recent string of KO wins, 3 in the UFC, do give him a slight edge in my mind. 18-1, Mateusz Chinzink. Oh, God. Rebecki takes on the last-minute replacement, well, four-day replacement, 12-3-0-1. Roosevelt, the Predator, Roberts. Not sure why you'd call yourself that. Roberts is 2 years younger, 6 inches taller, with 7 inches of reach going his way. Rebecki is riding a 3-fight UFC winning streak and rocks a pretty well-rounded style. Outside the UFC, he has 9 KO, 6 submission, and 3 decision wins. So in the end, he does come across as a finisher, but he does seem able to switch between those two parts pretty well. In the UFC, he rocks a 5.57 and 2.18 in striking, which highlights how he's able to pour it on and really controls opponent on the feet. In the same vein, he's a 3.50 takedown average, though his control time isn't that high, so it feels more like disruption or recovery than the main game plan. Roberts is a replacement for Aliev, and reads as a grinder overall, a 3.14 to 3.12 in striking, and a 1.44 takedown average. On that note, he can finish, but they really don't seem to show up too often in his repertoire. He also does rely on the takedown and control time heavily, since when he can't get it on his own, he is controlled and dominated on the feet. Given the late replacement, I'm going to run with Rebecki. I haven't even seen the Vegas odds for this, but despite the physical advantages of Roberts, 4-day late replacement, coming in against a fighter who tends to do both parts of the game very well, finishing and decisioning, I am going to go his way with Rebecki. Could Roberts win? Yes, but Roberts doesn't really finish. He grinds. Rebecki tends to push that pace, is able to grind, but likes to finish. Rebecki just going into this looks like the better fighter. Could Roberts prove me wrong? Yes, but I do think Rebecki will win this fight. 9-1, Tabitha Baby Shark Ricci wins worst ring name and takes on 11-3 Lupita Lupi Godinez. Ricci is 2 years younger, either an inch shorter or the same, because they can't agree, but Ricci is definitely dead even. Ricci is a ground-focused fighter, who can get the submission, but tends to control her opponent and take the fight to decision. Striking is barely functional and seems just good enough to keep in the fight. Numbers-wise, 4.12 to 4.45, and most of the time she keeps it close. Has taken a significant lead only twice. Takedown average hits at a 4.23 with about 48% accuracy, which is a little odd but not incredibly worrying. What is the fact that all these takedowns she doesn't get a lot of control time. Godinez is also a bit of a grinder, but she's a bit more rounded in terms of her game. 4.03 to 3.52 in striking, and she does tend to take significant striking lead. Backs it up with a 3.82 takedown average, but is better at holding it for control time compared to Ricci, and while she can finish on the ground, it is rather infrequent. Godinez is the favorite, and I will go against it and run with Ricci. I think she's riding hot and at least comparable with Godinez. In a grinding battle, I feel like this is a bit of a toss-up. I think Ricci getting a quantity of takedowns might look better than Godinez getting one and just being on top of her for rounds. I don't think that's how this fight will go, but writing this, that was my thought process. I'm not sure how accurate that is. Ending off the prelims. 10-1. Steve Astroboy Urseg looks to follow up his impressive debut against 13-3 Alessandro Nono Costa. Costa is 1 year younger at 27, but Urseg is either 4 or 3 inches taller, with an inch of reach also going his way. Now, Urseg does only have one UFC fight, but in that fight, he controlled his opponent and limited the offense of his opponent, David Dvorak. Now, the numbers are close for that fight, but after watching it live, it was a textbook fight of control. Outside the UFC, he's been pretty much a submission artist, with 6 of his wins coming that way. Costa has a few more UFC fights, and in those, he's been very much a striker. He rolls with 3.82 to 3.01, which speaks to his willingness to exchange and in turn keep the fight close. Does have the ability to get the finish, but in turn, when he doesn't, the fight is always close. Does also have submission ability with 6 submission wins, but in the UFC, he has 0 takedown attempts and 0 submission attempts. Don't know if he's moved away from that, don't know if it's a game plan matchup thing, or don't know if he's just going the Justin Gaethje route of fighting. Urseg is the favorite, and being very, very, very boring, I'm going to agree. Urseg controlled very well in the fight I saw, and I like his ability to go to the ground in this fight versus someone who hasn't shot a takedown. And while Costa can reverse, Costa can capitalize on mistakes, I think in a fight like this, there's going to be a lot of takedowns, and Urseg's going to be looking for a fair amount of ground control time. I'm not sure how many times Costa can survive and recover. Opening up the main card, 22-6 Diego Lopez looks to notch his second UFC win against 18-4 Pat Sabatini, which really sounds like a makeup artist. Lopez is 4 years younger, 2 or 3 inches taller, while also taking 2 in reach. Lopez has honestly struggled in the UFC, but as a whole, I would call him a submission artist with 12 career submission wins and 1 in the UFC. Now, it is worth noting that inside the UFC, he does not have a takedown. That seems to be part of his game plan, where he will play off his back with those submission attempts, going 3, 4, and 3 on attempts in each of his UFC fights. Now, obviously, the danger with that is that an opponent's able to fight it off and continue to dominate him on the ground, he's almost completely nullified. He does have 8 KO wins, but he's not done well with striking the UFC, which does lead me to say that. Sabatini has been a very different story with a highly active takedown game, average of 3.83 takedowns a fight, and the ability to pull submissions out at times. He also has occasionally had functional striking with a 1.9 to 135. Those numbers aren't all that surprising when you realize he just wants to wrestle with you the entire time. Vegas likes Sabatini narrowly, and I'm going to agree. Lopez's plan of playing off the back, playing out of position, or capitalizing on mistakes, it hasn't worked great so far. And I imagine someone like Sabatini, who wants to go to the ground, likely will be initiating takedowns. I think he knows what he's getting into, and I think he's going to be able to recognize and either avoid attempts or get out of the situation that he's in. Could Lopez win? Submission artists always can, but I think Sabatini in this case has the edge with the higher volume takedowns he's going to shoot, and probably being on top more often than Sabatini. 11, 3, and 1. Matt, the Steamroller Frevola, looks for 4 in a row against 12, 1, 0, and 1. God of War, Benoit Saint Denis. Saint Denis is 6 years younger, 2 inches taller, with another 2 inches in reach going his way. Frevola is a little odd in terms of the numbers, but he has been a slugger as of late, with his last 4 fights all ending by KO, and 3 of those going his way. On that note, he brings a 3.72 to 3.56 in striking, which makes sense given the power he can bring out. I will say that he has built significant leads in some fights, but not always. It does turn a bit of a slugfest at times. Of note, he also has a 2.26 takedown average, but has not had takedowns or ground control time in his last 3 wins. To be fair, they all were first round finishes, so maybe the game plan would have changed if it would have gone longer than 5 minutes. He also has been good at getting knockdowns as of late, which might be important. Saint Denis has been more so a finisher through and through, with each of his UFC wins ending by finish. In striking, he rolls with a 5.59 to 5.27, which does speak to his toughness and power, but seems weighed down by his submission wins since in his striking wins he outstrucks his opponents pretty decently. With takedowns, he carries a 4.72 and submission ability in spades. He does also get some solid control time off of the takedowns, lets him use his recovery as well as a control weapon. Favorite is Saint Denis, and I think out of blatant favoritism and some odd feeling in my gut, I'm going to go with Frevola here. Frevola is riding a hot hand, having found the finishing touch, and while he hasn't gone past the first round, both fighters are probably coming into this looking to finish it quick and get into a slugfest, and Frevola is the hot hand right now. Could Saint Denis win? It's a slugfest, I think so. I think Frevola can mix in takedowns, and Saint Denis might not be expecting it. This will be a close fight. It'll be fun. I'm taking Frevola more so on the coin flip potential, and the fact that I think Frevola is on a new groove and is the hot hand at this moment. This is not really a scientific one. It's a blatant favoritism one, but it's worked out with Chris Curtis a few times, so I'm going to keep doing it. 24 and 12, Jessica Ballesteros, I'm so sorry, Andrade looks to stop the skid against 13 and 3, Mackenzie Dern. Dern is 2 years younger, 1 or 2 inches taller, with an inch in reach, also going her way. Andrade tends to be a killer-be-killed fighter, where she pours on the striking while letting her ground game back it up or set up submission. In striking, she rolls with a 6.68 to 5.34, which does highlight her high-output striking and willingness to wade into fire. With that is the obvious chance she gets finished in turn. On the other hand, her takedowns do sit at a 2.54, but are not always necessary for submission wins, which speaks to her ability to play out of position or take advantage of mistakes. However, as of late, she has been taken down and submitted, which does highlight that certain opponents are able to bypass her defense and take the win from her. Dern is much more of a grinder, where she dominates her opponent with a mixture of high output striking and control time off takedowns. With takedowns, she does only carry 0.81, and I can say that it isn't always present in her game plan, but she has shown the ability to get control time without the takedown, reversing positions, or taking it off knockdowns or cage, or slips. Her striking is odd at a 3.36 to a 4.09, but I feel as if that's carried a bit by her losses, where she was blown the hell out in her 2 most recent ones, 113 to 61 and 144 to 49. Dern is the favorite, and I almost want to go against it, and I'm not going to. I'm going to roll with Dern. Andrade is dangerous. She's always a threat. She can get the finish. But Dern's grinding, the takedowns, the ability to match in a lot of striking, I don't think Andrade will be able to pull away like her two most recent losses. I think it'll be close with Andrade, and I think that falls into Dern's camp and gives Dern the advantage here. In a fight with way too big shoes to fill, 18-1, Sergey Pavlovich looks to keep the success going on short notice against 13-3, Tom Aspinall. Aspinall is a year younger, 2 inches taller, with 6 inches in reach going to Pavlovich. Pavlovich is a heavyweight. That's about it. In seriousness, he is on a 6-fight KO streak and rolls with an 8.72 to 4.33 in striking. Bit of a killer-be-killed fighter, but in his wins, he has consistently outstruck his opponents, with his closest being a 21-17 performance over Shamil Abdurakhimov. Butchered that. I assume his cardio is good enough to get past the first, but we haven't seen him go that deep yet. It is worth noting, especially in this matchup, that he does have a 75% takedown average with no attempted takedowns in the UFC. Aspinall is a bit of a different story. Not to say he doesn't have the finish touch, with the last 6 wins all being finishes, more so that he brings a dangerous ground game to the ring. His takedown average sits at a 3.70, and he is very good at taking advantage of those takedowns, with every fight in a takedown ending in a finish, 2 of them being submissions. His striking is also great, sitting at a 7.65 to 2.90, with that KO touch lurking in the wings, plus he has the ability to avoid damage and control the fight, however brief it happens to be. Favorite is Aspinall, and I'm being boring, I will agree. I think Aspinall being the original backup for this fight gives him a slight edge, plus Pavlovich getting short notice. Aspinall's ability to shoot the takedown makes him very dangerous. Aspinall's ability to get power on the feet, if not overly excel, is also good. So having that double varied game, I think, gives Pavlovich more to worry about. And while Pavlovich just has the touch to put him away, I think in this fight, Aspinall has the slight edge, which makes me go with him. And now, the main event. 29-3-1, Jiri BJP Proschaka looks to get the belt back against 8-2, Alex Poatan Pereira. Jiri is 5 years younger, either the same height or an inch shorter, though he does take a single inch in reach. Jiri is a finisher, and that sums it up. He racks a 5.77 to 5.40 and packs both power and variety in spades, but as the numbers show, he does get as he gives, with a decent amount of punishment coming back his way. In part, that is the fact he fights with his chin out and his face as a shield, but that is fixable and something that may have been addressed in his time off. In terms of the ground game, he rolls with a .38 takedown average, and it is very much reads as a situational recovery tool over a consistent presence in the game plan. Also has shown the ability to survive takedowns, or at least do enough to get back to the feet and set up a finish. Pereira is a bit different in style, but is still a finisher overall. He rolls with a 5.11 to 3.70 in striking, and obviously has a background as a kickboxer, and the technical aspects carry over and give him the ability to manage his offense and minimize a lot of damage coming his way. He also has the ability to survive on the ground and has shot a few takedowns himself, but a majority of his offense is based around the striking, moving around the octagon, and bringing his power out. He also has been known to throw submissions and survive takedowns of other fighters, not to mention a 70% takedown defense. That's wrong. The narrow, and I mean narrow, favorite is Pereira, and it makes sense. Jiri fights with his chin out, Jiri fights a little wild, Jiri does leave openings that he hopes athleticism can cover for. Pereira's a bit more sound technically with a kickboxing background and that style of striking more so managing, similar to Adesanya in a way. Pereira does have power that can match Jiri, and they both are able to bring those shots and capitalize on moments. In this fight, I am going to agree with Vegas. I'm going to go with Pereira, and that's more so because I don't know if Pereira is going to give Jiri enough moments to capitalize on, and if Jiri is going to be able to bait him into making the mistakes he wants him to make, and if Jiri will be able to outlast the striking power that Pereira has and the style of striking that he does. A bit more controlled and a bit more managing, similar to Adesanya in a way, if I'm being honest. That same sort of able to manage reach and manage distance very well. That being said, that was UFC 295. A little rushed, a little sloppy, but that describes the card pretty well. Overall, I'm interested in this card, a little excited for it. I think there are some good fights. I think there are some interesting fights. I think we have some interesting people in the prelims. I think we have some interesting people that we might be seeing around a bit more. We immediately have a title eliminator for the heavyweights, which will be fun. Jiri Pereira should be good. I say should because UFC has been known to dash hopes and dreams. But overall, I think this is a fun card. It's a salvageable card at least. I think it's a fight that it'll be decent to watch. It'll be a card that will have moments and will kind of be prove-it fights for some fighters on it. But in the end, that was UFC 295, and this has been State of the Division. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you want to, and have a great fight.